This lesson is all about formatting paragraphs, and the first thing we're going to talk about is how to change the paragraph alignment. Then we're going to talk about paragraph spacing and line spacing. Then a very important topic that many people are unaware of is how to use tabs. We're also going to look at something sort of related to tabs, which is indenting of paragraphs. And I don't mean indenting the beginning of a paragraph like you're used to when writing for English class. It's going to go a little bit beyond that. We're also going to learn how to add borders to our paragraphs, create bulleted and numbered lists, and then how to sort those lists once we have those lists created. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is paragraph alignment. And there are four basic choices for paragraph alignment. In order to change a paragraph, you actually don't need to select the entire paragraph. You just need to make sure that your cursor is in the paragraph at some point. So this could be just in the middle of a word. You actually don't have to select the entire paragraph. And you'll notice that at the top of the page, or on our toolbar, we've got four buttons here: align left, centered, align right, and justified. Now, align left is the default, and that's the one we're very used to. Notice that on the left hand side there's a perfect straight line with the text. It makes a perfect line. Over here on the right, you'll notice that it's more of a jagged edge. If we switch that text to be right aligned, the opposite, you'll know the complete opposite happens, where we have a jagged edge on the left and then we have a perfectly straight line on the right. Right aligned is probably the one that is used the least amount of times. Now, a lot of times in a business letter, you have what's called full justification or justify, and that's what you are familiar to seeing in a newspaper, where you have both sides which have a perfect straight line, and that's this fourth button. And if I go to justified, you'll notice now the text is perfectly aligned on the left hand side and perfectly aligned on the right hand side. And what the computer does to make that happen is actually puts more space in between the words. A good example is the second line. You can see that there's much larger spaces between the words. Even though you only hit the spacebar once, it spreads them out so that it can give you a perfect straight line on the left hand side and the right hand side. The last alignment is one that we use quite a bit, and that's centering. And what I'm going to do is put my cursor in the middle of this paragraph. And remember, a paragraph is any time that there is a hard return. So even though this is only one line, there's a hard return after it, or somebody has pressed the enter key, that means it's a paragraph. So I can press my centering button, and it'll put that in the center, and I can take my second line here and I can place that into the center as well. The next piece that we're going to take a look at is paragraph spacing. Now, most people actually go about paragraph spacing in the wrong way. If you wanted more space between this line and this line, what would you do? Well, in most cases, people would just make another paragraph. They would just hit the enter key and go about their business. Well, take a look at what that just did. Look at that huge space that's in there just because I hit the enter key. Well, what if I want more control over how much space is actually between the top paragraph and the bottom paragraph? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to make sure my cursor is anywhere within this paragraph, and I'm going to use a dialog box here to set my paragraph spacing, and it can be very specific. So I'm going to go up to the top to format, and then I'm going to go to paragraph. And in this dialog box, the very first tab is the indents and spacing tab. And we're going to jump down here to the spacing area. And you'll notice above paragraph it has 0.17 inch of space. Okay. Well, I'm going to keep that, but then I'm going to go to my below paragraph, and I'm going to say, you know what? I want half an inch of space after the paragraph. So that means, if I move my dialog box here, that between what is the solution and innovative business solutions, I will get half an inch of space. So if I click OK, you'll now notice that I have half an inch of space there. Notice I can't click in that space. Okay, it's not. I did not press the enter key. I used paragraph spacing. So let's say that's a pretty big space. I don't need quite that much space. So I'm going to go back to, need to make sure that I'm in my correct paragraph. I'm going to go back to format, then paragraph. And I'm going to say, oh, you know what? I'm going to take half of that. I'm just going to take 0.25. Click OK. And now we have the perfect amount of space that we want between the first and second paragraph. Notice that you have an option. You can change the spacing before the paragraph, so what's above it, or you can change the spacing for the paragraph on what's below it. Related to paragraph spacing is line spacing, and this is a popular one in school. Oftentimes when you write a formal paper for an English class, or any class, they'll ask you to make sure that your text is double spaced. Alright, so what we're going to do is click anywhere in our paragraph, and this time we're going to go to Format, Paragraph, but instead of taking a look at paragraph spacing, we're going to take a look at line spacing, and we see we have a choice down here, and it currently defaults to single, and the three most popular ones are 1.5 lines, and single, and double. So we're going to change it to double. Click OK, and now it puts double the spacing in between each line. Makes it more readable. Also helps the teacher when they need to write in comments to help you out. So if you ever need your document double spaced, go to Format, Paragraph, and you can change it to double spacing. Now we're going to take a look at using what are called tabs, and tabs are an extremely important function in a word processor because it's the only way for us to line up data vertically in our document. Okay? Have you ever tried to line up data using the space bar? You know, you wanted to create 3 columns, and so you put spaces in between. If you ever tried to do that, you probably became very frustrated because it's not possible. And the reason that is because when you type in a word processor, the font, there is each letter in between, each letter has its own spacing, and that's called kerning. And every font and every letter has a slightly different amount of space that goes in between each letter. And so it's virtually impossible to get the correct amount of spacing because it really depends on how much space was in the letters that you typed. In some fonts it's actually very obvious. If you look at it, it almost looks like there's a space between 2 letters, and you go back and you look at it and there really isn't. And that has to do with the way that the font is designed and the space that goes in between the letters. So truly the only way to create vertical alignment in a word processor is by using tabs. Now, many of you are familiar with the tab key because you know that's how you're going to indent a paragraph. And if I press my tab key, you'll notice that it goes at half-inch increments across the top. Okay? So if you look at the ruler at the top and then where my cursor is, it goes in half-inch increments every time I press the tab key. Okay? Well, what if you want more control over those increments? What if you want it to be in 1-inch increments? Well, what we can do is we can put in what are called tab stops. Up here in the upper left-hand corner, you will notice that there is a little icon, and right now it's an L. And what this does is selects the type of tab stop that we can put in. We actually place the tab stop into the document on the ruler, but over here we select the type, and we're going to talk about the different basic types. The first one is called a left align tab stop, and it's very similar to the discussion we had earlier in the lesson when we talked about alignment with paragraphs. A left align tab stop, wherever the tab stop is, it will make a perfect straight edge on the left hand side. If I go to my next one, a right align tab stop does the complete opposite. Perfect right hand edge. Then I also have what's called a decimal tab, which will align my decimal points. And I have a centering tab where the information will center on the actual tab. Okay, so we're going to demonstrate these so you can get a better idea of how they actually work. So the first thing we're going to do is stick in our tab stops, and then we'll begin typing. So my first tab stop, I'm going to make left aligned, and I'm going to put that at 1 inch. So I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to drag it to 1 inch. My next tab stop, I'm going to make a centering tab, and I'm going to put that at 3.5 inches. And my last tab stop, I want to make a decimal tab. And I'm going to put that at 5.5 inches. Okay, so I have my 3 tab stops put in. I've got my left align tab, my centering align tab, and then my decimal tab. And what we're going to do for this example is create just a simple little grocery list. As soon as I press the tab key, what it does is it takes me to my first tab stop. If you recall earlier, when I pressed the tab key, it took me to 1/2 inch. Now that the tab stops are in, the tab key goes to the first stop. Think of it like a bus. Bus goes till it gets to the bus stop. The tab, the cursor, will go until it gets to the stop, and then it will pause there. So my first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, we'll put our headers in. This is the item. Notice that it's perfectly aligned to the left edge. Okay. Press my tab key, it goes to my next stop. This I'm going to say is department. Notice my tab stop is at 3.5 inches, but it's a centering tab, so my text has now centered on that tab. And the last one we're going to put in is what's called price. Okay. And by default, because I have no decimal place, it has aligned to the right hand edge. Press my enter key, I go to the next line. Notice that it keeps the tabs that I had from the previous line when I press enter. So now I'm going to put an extra line in here, and I'm going to press tab, and I'm going to do my first item. So my first item is going to be milk. Press my tab key, and it's in the dairy department, and it costs $3.15. Hit my enter key, can do my next one. I'm going to get some steak. That is in the meat department, and that is going to cost me $12.50. Oops, had an extra decimal point in there. $12.50. Now you should start to see what's happening. Okay, I have my perfect left edge here on my left tab. I'm centered here in my centering tab, and my decimal points are lining up with my decimal tab. Okay, if you tried to do this same type of list using a space bar, you'd never be able to line it up. You might get it close, but you'd never be able to perfectly line it up. Okay, so I'm going to get some cereal, and that's in dry goods, and that's going to cost me $4.25. I can't type today. Alright, so you get the idea with tabs. You've got left align, centering, decimal, and we also have a right align tab if you ever needed to use that as well. Now, as I told you earlier, when you go to the next line, it automatically keeps your tab stops. Well, what if I want to now get rid of those tab stops or change them? There is a way to clear them so that you no longer have them in the rest of your document in case you wanted to do something different. To clear your tab stops or to get rid of them, you're going to go to Format, Paragraph, and there is a tab at the top called Tabs. And you'll notice that it lists our tabs over here on the left hand side. And I want to get rid of them all, so I'm going to click Delete All, and then I'm going to click OK. And you'll notice now if I look up in my ruler, my tab stops are done for where my cursor is currently positioned. If I go back up into my list, my tab stops still exist, but if I come back down to where I had cleared them, they're no longer there. Next thing that we're going to take a look at is how to indent paragraphs. And I'm going to switch back to my original document. And for most of us, when we want to indent the paragraph, we press the tab key, it gives us a 1/2 inch indent, and we go about our business. But there's actually a better way, or a more precise way, to work with indenting. And that is using these icons that are in the upper left hand corner. What I can do is the top icon, if I drag it to 1/2 inch, does what's called a first line indent. And that's usually what we use when writing paragraphs for a paper. First line indent takes the first line of the paragraphs and moves it to wherever you place that icon. Okay? If I drag it back to the beginning, it'll stay at the very beginning. Okay? What if I wanted to indent the entire paragraph? Meaning don't want to change the first line, but I want to move the whole thing over. I can take the bottom arrow and I can move the entire paragraph over. From this point, I can drag the top arrow independently. The top arrow always can move independently. The bottom arrow always moves both together. Okay? This is a very good trick when doing certain types of citations. In MLA format, if you are quoting a long quote, you actually indent the entire thing on its own in its own paragraph. And this is really the only way to make that happen in the word processor. Also, in a lot of citations, they have weird indenting where they want the first line to be to the left and the rest of the lines to be indented. And that's the way that you can accomplish that. You move the whole thing over to 1/2 inch and then you drag your first line indent back to the left. Okay? So that's the way you can format some of those things. A lot of people try and do what I just showed you incorrectly by pressing the enter key and then they tab in. And then when they try to format it later, it does all kinds of crazy things. The proper way to do your citations is using your indent icons the way I just showed you. Next, we're going to take a look at how to put a border around a paragraph. And you can think of it as like a box around the paragraph. So I'm going to click anywhere in this paragraph, and I'm going to go to Format, Paragraph. And I have a tab here at the top called Borders. And I'm going to click on Borders. And you'll notice by default, there's no border. So if I click this icon, which will put a border around the entire paragraph, then I can select how thick I want the line, what they call its weight. So I'm going to select its weight over here on the side. And then I'm going to click OK. And it puts a box or a border around that paragraph. Now, we can get really specific with this if we want to. If I go back to Format Paragraph, by clicking on one of these lines, I can change whether or not it displays or not. So I turned off the top and the bottom border. And I click OK. And now I have a border just on the side. I can also, by going into this dialog box, I can put the borders back, but I can change its weight. So I can say that the top and bottom border are thicker than the side borders. And so you can get really specific. You can even, if I go back in there one more time, say, okay, I want the, select my color and my weight, the top and bottom border to be very heavy and red, and the side borders to be black. And so you can get very specific with your borders. I'm going to switch back to my blank document, and the last thing we're going to talk about is creating numbered lists and bulleted lists. Okay? What's really great about the word processor is it will automatically recognize when you're doing a list. So if I put 1 period, and I'm going to do the National League East teams, as soon as I hit my enter key, it automatically recognizes that I want a list. And each time I go to the next line, it automatically numbers it for me. Okay. If I'm done numbering and I hit the enter key twice, what it does is takes away that last bullet and takes me out of that numbering. I can do the same thing with bullets. Okay. If I want to do a bulleted list up on the toolbar, I can click bullets, I can turn it on, and I can do a bulleted list the same way. Now with bullets, if you don't like your bullets, what you can do is click anywhere in your bulleted list, and open up your bullets and numbering dialog box, which you can get to by your toolbar on this button, or I can go to Format, Bullets and Numbering. And you'll notice I have different styles here. So instead of the regular old small circle, I could go with something like a square, and it changes it. Or I could also actually go over here to Graphics, and I could get even more choices, and I could apply a different bullet to the item.